This is Reaganism, a podcast dedicated to exploring where the Reagan movement lives today. I'm Roger Zakheim, your host, director of the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C.
On this episode of Reaganism, Roger sits down with Alexandr Wang, who's the CEO and founder of Scale AI, which seeks to accelerate the development of AI applications. They discuss Mr. Wang's innovation in the AI space, the future of AI, government regulations, and its effects on AI, competition with China and what that means for AI, and more.
Alexandr Wang, welcome to Reaganism.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are the CEO and founder of Scale AI, which delivers, and I'm quoting here, high-quality training data for AI applications such as driving cars, robotics, mapping, and increasingly stuff related to the world of the military. We're going to get into all of that in a second. You left MIT after 1 year at age 19, moved to the Bay Area shortly after. You founded Scale AI. And Forbes, not too long ago, ran a story on you. So if the company hadn't been successful already and people didn't know about your work already, now you made it because Forbes gave you that full profile, which was actually a really excellent piece. Let's just start with a bit of the bio. Tell us what brought you to that moment where you call your parents and you say, I'm leaving MIT, horrifying news for any parents to hear, and I'm starting a company on AI. How'd that go down? I have a daughter who's about to start college in a year or so.
There you go. Well, if she calls you to drop out, let her follow her dreams is maybe my piece of advice. But no, I mean, I grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Both my parents were physicists who worked for the national lab there. So I always grew up very much so in the heart of the intersection between national security and technology, and I'm sure we'll get into that coming up here. But all throughout childhood, I think artificial intelligence, always is very alluring as maybe the sort of the grand prize of technology in many ways. Like how it's this miraculous thing that humanity and humans are so intelligent, and what would it be like to be able to develop that technologically as well. And so I was enthralled by the field, and I was studying at MIT, and then I realized pretty quickly that the actual challenges and the actual bottlenecks to the technology were extremely mundane. It wasn't, there weren't enough mad scientists in labs that were sort of cooking up the next best thing. It was a very visceral lack of data to fuel these algorithms. And at the end of the day, all these AI algorithms, ranging from self-driving cars to now ChatGPT to whatever implementations we want to build for the military and for national security, they all boil down to the data upon which they're built. I'd seen this firsthand. I wanted to build a camera inside my refrigerator that would tell me when my roommates were stealing my food, and learned pretty quickly that was an extremely difficult task because, again, there was no data to work off of. There was nothing to base these algorithms on top of. And so that was sort of the inspiration. And I think that the piece that we've been, that I've been most proud of over the past 7 years since starting the company has been, we've really been a part of many of the huge breakthroughs in artificial intelligence since then. We worked very closely on self-driving cars. We worked with the companies that were doing the first deployments of L4 technology of full self-driving in city environments. We've worked with OpenAI since 2019 and all the way back to GPT-2. And I like to say it's been a 4-year overnight success. And it's been incredible to just see the past 6 months of progress in artificial intelligence. It is truly, it is one of the most incredible times to be a technologist ever.
I want to get after all of that. And of course, if we would have had a conversation a year ago, same thing, listeners and viewers would be far less familiar with what you're talking about. It would have seemed very foreign to them, not familiar. And of course, you had that quip just now, 4 years overnight, right? This idea that ChatGPT comes out and we're all living and experiencing what you have been thinking about working on for so long with large language models. I want to get into all of that, but pick up on one thread of your bio and your parents working at Los Alamos, and of course, nuclear weapons sector. This is the research labs and the like. We had a conversation with Jeff Bezos, another prominent founder. His company did pretty well, whose grandfather came out of the national labs as well. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, actually, I think Amazon both Amazon and Microsoft, I believe were both initially started in Albuquerque, New Mexico, either Albuquerque or somewhere around there. I didn't know that Jeff Bezos' grandfather came out of the national labs, but I think that this is just a testament to, the great public-private, public partnership where, so much innovation ultimately does come out of the labs ecosystem.
Well, it's clearly something, the gene pool, some of the exposure and this kind of familiarity with, national security, public service, kind of American companies. Jeff Bezos, not too long ago, said at our Reagan National Defense Forum, which we've had the privilege of you attending, that in his mind, it was always very clear that Amazon was a national security company, a company that supported U.S. national security. And of course, in the years since, from the business standpoint, they've gotten more involved. Scale AI, of course, doing the same. We'll get to that in a little bit. You have many top shelf customers, from Microsoft to Meta, and of course, U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force on the security side. Let's go a little bit deeper in terms of what Scale AI does. And you talked about kind of these bottlenecks. These are very kind of mundane bottlenecks. It's referred to often as data labeling, and it seems to be very people intensive in terms of your slice of it. Give us a little bit more color and granularity on the kind of the bottleneck that you were seeking to solve and the people intensive element of your business.
Yeah. So if you look at all of the recent research and all of the breakthroughs in AI, it really boils down to a really simple equation. The more computational power you throw at them, so the more NVIDIA GPUs and other chips and hardware that you can throw at them, plus the more data that you can throw at these models, yields just stellar, incredible levels of performance. And the biggest breakthrough, honestly, and it sounds so simple, of the past, let's call it 3-4 years, has been just scaling these things up to the max. So scaling up the amount of data, scaling up the amount of compute, scaling up the model sizes all the way up to the max, and just seeing these incredible models come out of that. And so what we specifically help with, when you think about these algorithms, they don't just sort of magically learn all of these concepts and all these things out of thin air. They learn them from data, and that data often is somehow generated by humans. So whether it's internet data, which has all emerged from us using the internet and typing our thoughts and taking photos and interacting with one another on the internet, or it's via a process by which experts will sort of help produce data from scratch. At Scale, maybe our specific breakthrough or secret sauce, or what we really focused on, was how do you take a tech-enabled and AI-enabled approach to actually producing all this data. So to your point on being very people-intensive, I think the state of the art before we really got involved was, you would just have to have people go through huge amounts of data very inefficiently. And our perspective always is that can't be the technical cutting-edge state-of-the-art approach. And so we've sort of pioneered an approach which involves significantly more automation, significantly more technology, and has actually involved more and more fine-grained experts, because they're sort of able to be higher and higher leverage in the system. And through that process, we've been able to just dramatically scale the amount of data that the AI industry has worked with.
Right, and has an endless appetite for. And you refer to your metaphor as the kind of pick and shovels during the gold rush. Well, explain. So the AI, the Scale AI workforce essentially has developed the tools. You have humans, right, with the best in class pick and shovel that could take that data and then give it to those trying to build these models, whether it be large language models or something else. Get that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like where we sit is really as sort of a infrastructure provider to the overall industry, not unlike NVIDIA or these other chip companies, because what we found, and this goes back to all the way back to when I started the company, what I found is that, there are so many companies working on building the next great model or building the next great AI tool or AI product. And there was a real dearth of people who are willing to sort of lay down the roads, so to speak, that needed sort of like, relatively mundane work, but stuff that had to be done to actually enable this great bout of innovation since then.
Right. So whatever the sector, wherever you're going to use AI, they're going to need your product, right? I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. So whether it's a national security problem for the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army, which we'll talk about, or automotive, which you referenced earlier, right? In order to have, self-driving vehicles, they need a tremendous amount of data of a certain kind, where Scale AI's, picks and shovels are at work sending it up to whoever is seeking that, from a Tesla to any other company that wants to kind of get to that, deliver the future of automotive.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and to your point, I think we're just scratching the surface of the AI industry writ large, but also all of the different industries, data sets, and applications of this technology. If you think about it, most of the data in the world out there is not actually on the internet. It's mostly private data, proprietary data that is really just sort of waiting to be implemented into an algorithm, into an AI system that can then just create huge amounts of surplus and gain.
And even this stuff out there could be proprietary or only allowed to be used with, in a certain licensed fashion, and it may not be. And this is what we're hearing a lot about with ChatGPT, right? It's generating stuff, but using proprietary, perhaps at times, data information. Let me read you something. We'll zoom out for a second. Really fascinating on Scale AI, and it's obviously been so successful. Congratulations to you and your co-founder and all your colleagues. Google Sundar Pichai said the following about AI. He said, AI is one of the most important things that humanity is working on. Humanity. This is not a sector or a business or one part of the world's economy. It's humanity. It's more profound. And then I don't know, he says, electricity or fire. Is he overstating the matter?
Well, I think that if you were to take a purely anthropological sort of viewpoint on the matter, and you sort of zoom out past the hype of ChatGPT and all the recent hubbub, and you were to think about what are these big breakthrough technologies that sort of then unleash just a sort of a new mode or a new it changes fundamentally what humanity looks like. Obviously, there was, as kind of as you mentioned, there was fire, there's electricity. The printing press was extremely influential.
That changed the world. Religion, yeah. For sure.
Yep, the Industrial Revolution with sort of modern manufacturing practice, steam engine. Those were massive breakthroughs, and then the computer and the internet, and these have sort of there's sort of this great blog post by Tim Urban of Wait But Why that sort of describes this. But what we're seeing is just human history itself is compressing so greatly. Like the innovations are happening faster and faster and faster and faster. And I think artificial intelligence is a breakthrough. I don't think we've solved it yet, to be clear. And
sure.
We're really seeing sort of the early signs of incredible AI, but it is a breakthrough on that level. And I think once we achieve it, then I think that what humanity looks like after that is very different. We're going to be significantly better at I think the next breakthrough after that comes even faster and faster and faster. And so I actually don't think he's hyperbolic. Now, I do think the question is, how close are we to artificial general intelligence? What are the limitations of the current technology? And I think that's a very helpful and very useful debate to have. But I believe in the tech.
So Alex, obviously the world has been struck by this in terms of large language models and ChatGPT. What's the next one? What's the next one we're going to be like, oh my goodness? Is it automotive? Is it someplace else? I mean, school children putting their queries into ChatGPT and getting an awesome, paper that would have taken them hours, if ever, been able to produce. That's transformative, but that's not the scale of fire or electricity. What do you think the next one is that we have to be ready for?
Yeah, I think that one rule about artificial intelligence, by the way, is that it is an incredibly unpredictable field, in the sense that, to your point on ChatGPT, if you had asked even most experts in the AI industry 5 years ago, where did they think the same question? Where do you think the next breakthrough is going to be? A lot of them would have said robotics,
right,
or fully autonomous self-driving vehicles. Some people would talk about quantum computing. It's a totally different set of breakthroughs, and ultimately it ended up being a near human level chatbot. And so I think it's been it's been a very unpredictable industry. But what I would say is I think that the next set of breakthroughs are going to be scientific in nature. I think we're going to utilize AI to then solve some of the great technological challenges and the great scientific challenges that we as a humanity has been stuck on for the past few decades.
Yeah, you read about this in terms of like cancer research, and it's already been applied in some ways in terms of vaccines, but you think if we continue feeding it the data, we're going to be in a place where it could think in ways that humans wouldn't otherwise be able to think, and therefore identify patterns and solutions that we couldn't have conceived on our own. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. Let's shift the conversation a bit in terms of your outlook about AI. You seem to be generally optimistic in public reporting and our conversations that could be a force for good. We'll talk about China in a moment here. You have very important views on that, which I want to discuss with you. But before we arrive at China, let's talk about your condition for AI to be something positive and good for humanity. For you, it requires American leadership. Take us through that. You hear about the need for American leadership in a lot of ways here in Washington, D.C., whether it's the war in Ukraine or the competition with China. There's a moral kind of role that people think that the oldest democracy in the world should lead. We need leadership here. You're talking about leadership in AI. Tell us why that's the focus for you.
Yeah, I think that, well, just in the same way that, AI, if you believe that AI, which I certainly do, that AI is sort of this next level breakthrough, one of the most important technologies of our time, then you look at the technology and it can be used for, the most incredible, empowering things for humanity, but it can also be used for some of the most, scary and frankly awful, implementations for humanity. It could be used for, heavily for misinformation and propaganda. It could be used heavily for suppression of minorities or suppression of certain people. Obviously you said to delay before getting China, but they have shown, the CCP in particular has shown a great willingness to apply these breakthrough technologies for blatant human rights violations. And so if you think about where we are geopolitically, and I say American leadership in context of obviously the where the state that the world is in, the countries that are most technologically advanced, there's a big trade-off between democratic systems and non-democratic systems and totalitarian systems. And I personally believe for a technology like AI, which has such a huge, great potential for misuse, to make sure that we as a society are on the happy path, we need to make sure that we're instilling it and imbuing it with, democratic values of basic human rights, values that I think we as a society can all agree with. And I think America is one of the only places where this can happen, where you have not only this confluence of the proper value systems, the proper democratic values, and the proper belief in human rights, as well as the innovation engine, the sort of the technical capability and prowess to ensure that we usher in this technology in the right way.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's stay on this point for a little bit, because what I hear you saying is nurturing values in a technology that fundamentally is nurtured by humans. Right? I mean, just the way you talk about data, what your business does, and generating these models and allowing the applications to play out in all these ways, from health to security and everything in between. It does make sense, intuitive for a non-technical person, that values here matter, and that in Washington and the world of government, and you were here recently. I want to refer to an event that Scale AI hosted here at the Reagan Institute by quoting a congressman who spoke there, Mike Gallagher, congressman from Wisconsin, who's leading the select committee. But regulation becomes the language that Washington uses. right? And this idea that, we have to see what's going to come with this. And some have gone so far as to call for a pause until we figure out how to harness this technology. Take a minute just to reflect on, that outlook, the place for regulating the AI sector such that it is, before it's rolled out in the way that we saw with ChatGPT and large language models. And this notion somehow that you could put this on pause. I think you and I would agree that one of the most important reasons not to do that is because if we're not moving forward and staying in the lead, your word leadership, then someone else will, and that likely will be China. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but give me a perspective as a company that you lead, that you found, that's in the AI space, knowing that Washington is gearing up to figure out how to harness this in the form of regulation.
Yeah, well, what I'll first say is I think regulation is needed and very appropriate. I think the technology has progressed extraordinarily quickly, and I think the worst thing that could happen is if we didn't have the right regulatory frameworks to keep up with the pace of technology, given just how quickly it's moving. So I for one applaud a lot of the efforts within Washington to really deeply understand the technology, which I see a lot of, and based on that understand what are the right ways to sort of ensure that there are reasonable guardrails in place. I think from my perspective, I think the greatest risk that we have is misuse of the technology versus the technology itself. There's people who are sort of fundamentally afraid of the risk that the AIs are going to take over and we're going to have a super intelligence that we can't control. I personally think that's further off, although this is one of these really fiery discussions that you have in San Francisco on a day-to-day basis. But I believe misuse is the real thing that we need to keep in mind. And I think there's both intentional misuse by bad actors, and there's just negligence. There are folks who may be perfectly well-meaning, but just don't undergo the right due diligence to actually deploy the technology in a safe and scalable way. And I think we're even seeing some of that in how a lot of companies sort of race to roll out technology that even so far has caused some level of consumer harm. There was this case of an individual in Europe who spoke to a chatbot for weeks and weeks, and then at the end of that decided to kill himself. There are real risks with this technology that we need to be mindful of. Now, I divorce that from the question of taking a pause on the technology itself, because I think there is a need, kind of as we discussed, for American leadership for the technology, for artificial intelligence. We need to lead, and I think the reality is our near peer competitors are not going to pause on AI development. A, they're behind, but B, they view this, the CCP has talked explicitly about how they view AI as a historic opportunity to, potentially leapfrog the United States, and they want to be a leader in artificial intelligence by 2030. And we see it.
They want to lead. I mean, this is not about be a leader, kind of be a peer. This, they've decided, that is the Chinese Communist Party, is a place where they want to have a comparative advantage, that they want us to be second to them because they seem to, at least their leadership understands the implications and the potential of leading. It's
happening in real time. There's I recently counted, there's 6 Chinese AI labs that are all funded at the level of sort of one of the great labs in the United States, like an OpenAI level, so to speak. So they're moving extremely aggressively. Many of them have ex-employees from the leading companies in the United States. So there's certainly a transfer of know-how that is going to happen, regardless of whether we pause or not. And so we need to take it super seriously.
Let me read you what Congressman Gallagher said about a pause in AI and the need to regulate. He warned that as people consider such a pause, to AI advancement to lay ground rules, right? It's essentially to regulate. Our adversaries, namely the Chinese Communist Party, this is Mike Gallagher speaking, are collecting. And let's get this part extraordinarily clear, stealing troves of data to train and equip their systems against us. The danger is not simply their actions, it would be in our lack of action. Anytime we cede, is time used against us. Maintain the American technological edge in society, and most certainly on the battlefield, means full steam ahead. Peggy Noonan, who was someone advocating the pause in making the case, said, and don't tell me China's the reason, feeling that we need to, as a country, to be true to our values, my words, not hers, but this is the way I understood it, need to take time to figure out how to infuse and grow this in such a way. It sounds to me you're sympathetic to Congressman Gallagher's outlook and view the competition as that cutthroat. You've written about AI and competition with China. Give me your take on what Mike Gallagher said.
Yeah, I can appreciate both perspectives, because I think that it is, it is certainly a very important technology, and I think we want to be very thoughtful about it. And I don't think, I think we would all regret if we felt we had moved too quickly in deploying the technology, and that caused, harm to our country, to our values. I think there's two separate questions here. One is on the development of the technology, which
yes.
I think we cannot, we can't take our foot off the gas, because that is the most important thing for, frankly, I think the future of U.S.-China competition. But then there's the deployment of the technology, and I think that we need to have sort of we need to realize these two things are not the same. You can be developing the technology extremely aggressively, be working on building cutting-edge AI techniques, ensure that you have the greatest researchers in the world working on this, ensuring that we have the largest supercomputers, the largest data sets to be able to do this work, and then I think you have decisions as to how you deploy that, how you roll it out to the American population, how you roll it out in these industries, how you roll it out to, let's say, diagnose diseases, and how do you use it to, how do you control misinformation? That's a separate set of topics that I think we should be thoughtful about, but we should not stop on the development.
Yeah, no, that's a great distinction, important distinction, although you can make an argument that even development needs to be regulated, needs to involve some sort of oversight. And the same, we started out our conversation talking about the nuclear enterprise in this country, the infrastructure, and you wouldn't have people in the lab working on nuclear technology without the appropriate regulatory agencies aware and putting some guardrails in terms of how they do things, and if they're pursuing something, that there's awareness there. So I think even on the development side, you're hearing people say there should be some sort of regulatory framework, but no doubt an important distinction there. One other area as we think about this is open and closed AI. So you don't do the pause, but what you hear a lot is, hey, this shouldn't be like, I don't know, the way we deal with technology in other spaces where software is open and everybody gets to comment, and the best practice becomes a convention and everybody's learning from everybody else's work product. Open. There's an argument to say, hey, we should entertain doing this in a closed fashion to get after effectively, what Congressman Gallagher was speaking about, that whether it's through legal or illegal means, others are stealing or just taking what we've done. And if winning is critical here, as you take that view, Alex, then we ought to be closed. How do you think about that?
Yeah, there's it's a nuanced topic. I'll say a few things. I do genuinely believe that open ecosystems and open source software has been in aggregate a great accelerant for American innovation and American and sort of progress in artificial intelligence. And this is because there's 300 million brilliant people in the United States. Not all of them are going to be in the room where there's some closed lab working on this technology, and you enable sort of a much broader ecosystem of individuals to contribute to the technology. Now, there are obviously the risks that other countries can sort of draft off of this open ecosystem, and certainly there is a real risk to that. But this what I think has happened with software. We look at the internet and software. What's happened is it's been a booster rocket for American capabilities and American technology, and there are some positive externalities. Other people gain, but it's been this sort of like huge boost for the American innovative ecosystem. It pulls the best and brightest from across the world into the United States to participate. It's a very positive force.
Go ahead.
The other piece I was just going to mention is that the open ecosystem is going to exist with or without American cooperation at this point. These are some recent developments. The whole industry is moving so quickly, but I think roughly a month ago, there was the UAE released a leading open source large language model, like a system like ChatGPT, called Falcon 40 billion. And this system, it's the history of this is very interesting, because what the UAE did is they procured a large cluster of NVIDIA GPUs, and then they contacted a French startup.
So NVIDIA GPUs, that's the general processing unit. Then NVIDIA, the AI chips, effectively,
Yep.
right?
Yep, they got the AI chips, and then they reached out to a set of French researchers, who then did the actual development to build a cutting edge large language model, and then they open sourced it. They decided to publish it to put UAE on the map of this global AI race. And it's an extremely performant model. It is arguably the most performant open source model that's out there right now. And I think this is going to be more of a trend. I think that there's going to be a sort of global dialogue, a global open ecosystem with artificial intelligence. And I think it's important that the United States participates in that.
That's a great point. The race is on, and you can close, but it will end up potentially, based on what you've just described, harming you more than helping. It almost presupposes that by closing, you'll be able to close the lead, or sustain the lead, I should say. Remaining minutes before we hit the lightning round, one of the unique facets and one of the reasons you and I had the opportunity to get to know each other and engage is Scale AI has unabashedly been a company that supports U.S. national security interests. You have a thriving, best I can tell, commercial business, but also very deliberately and in a focused fashion went to support the AI needs of the U.S. government and U.S. national security agencies. So it was this dual-use company, which makes sense given the description. Love for you to talk a little about that. The workforce piece is quite interesting because you're really deep in the global South and in terms of those supporting Scale AI's work, but in terms of the national security and U.S. government work, that seems to be tied to within the United States. That's got to be a challenging thing to do on the management side. But more broadly, here you are, you're doing the most sophisticated businesses in the world of AI, and then you enter working with the U.S. government. What's your impression? How much are they utilizing it? What's the optimization opportunity for our military, for example? Is it something there where they need to be? Are you optimistic or deflating to see where our military is using AI and particularly your products?
Yeah, I think we as a country are in the first innings of a real a very important transformation, and that is sort of like this next great technological transformation of our warfighter, of our national security capabilities writ large. I think we're extremely early in this process, and I think everyone within the military will readily admit that we have a lot of work to do, and we have to start laying the groundwork for this this major transition. And oh, by the way, we don't have that much time because we are in very uncertain geopolitical climate. So I think it's incredibly important. One of the reasons I think at this point we're one of the the only AI companies that actually has chosen very deliberately to commit ourselves to national security. And the history of how it came about is that coming from Los Alamos and having this sort of having it sort of emblazoned in my mind the story of the Manhattan Project and all these brilliant scientists who came together to defend our country and helped usher in this. One of the huge factors for this long period of relative peace, Pax Americana, has been this technological innovation. It felt like we were moving more and more towards a precipice of the next great technological breakthrough that could define in many ways the sort of the next era of whatever the sort of like next era of Pax Americana, and this is against a backdrop of the largest technology companies, the most innovative AI companies, refusing to work with the U.S. national security enterprise, and it was a really strange, it almost didn't make any sense, or it really doesn't make sense. But realized, if it doesn't make sense to me, I can talk about it as much as I want, but I sort of, we have a role to do, we have a duty to fill, and we have a role to play. And so that's really why we made this great commitment. And I think in the years that we've been doing this for the past 4 or 5 years, what I've personally found is this incredible, everyone within the DoD, everyone within the national security community deeply understands, yes, we need modernization, we need better software, we need better AI. This needs to happen as quickly as it possibly can. And then the realities are just that the system has places hurdles, and it makes it difficult to modernize as quickly as all of us intuitively understand we would like to. And we're seeing great progress on this front, don't get me wrong, but I think that I think the most frustrating part of the entire situation is there is not a single person who does not think we need to move faster in modernizing our warfighter and modernizing our capabilities. But even with all that, there's sort of some realities to the system, which means it moves a bit too slowly.
Yeah, I think you're being diplomatic with saying it moves a bit too slowly, but I think part of it is leadership, recognizing this needs to be done and invested in. Part of it is kind of having everybody down in the organization understand it in the same way the world is now understanding, ChatGPT and large language models. And I think on the military side and the military operations to really conceive of how the AI could transform our military platforms, for example, or how the military does business. And we need that. The military, no doubt, needs that accelerant the same way that ChatGPT accelerated people's understanding of what AI could do. One follow-up on that, and then we'll go to the lightning round, just in terms of you're talking about Scale AI and its approach to national security and the U.S. military, distinct from other AI companies that were in some place between hesitating to engage to just not engaging. One of the things you hear is because the workforce wouldn't support it. There was some sort of conception of, hey, the workforce can dictate where they feel this technology should go. And if they feel that the U.S. military wasn't moral, so therefore it's against my morals and I can't, work in that space. You are such a workforce intensive entity, right? Scale AI. Has it been hard to recruit, particularly, the U.S. Business that's focused on supporting the U.S. government, national security agencies?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think that this has been a question for this is maybe a question for us even as we were sort of embarking on this journey. And I think this is an example where our intuition was incorrect, where there's actually a ton of people out there, a ton of incredibly talented engineers and AI people and builders who are incredibly excited to support national security. Recognize that this is one of the most important issues of our time, and know that we need to build these systems to ensure the sort of sanctity of our democracy. We've one of the things that we've done, we built a generative AI platform, Scale Donovan, which allows the U.S. government to actually utilize and partake in all these advancements in large language models. Our workforce was incredibly excited to build this out and actually bring large language models into the hands of our men and women who are serving our country. And in this process, we deployed the first large language model into a classified network for the U.S. government. And I think this is interesting for a few reasons. First off, I think it's crazy that it's incredibly exciting, I think, for myself, and we should think exciting for our country that that a small company like ours, like Scale, can have such a large impact in actually pushing forward the sort of the ball for our national security, our national security modernization and where exactly we're at. I think that's very encouraging. I think that's sort of, if anything, is from my perspective, is a call to action to all the technologists out there. Like, hey, you can make a very big difference in just a matter of years if you really focus on it. And I think that the disappointing viewpoint here, the disappointing way to look at this is, why aren't there more people why aren't there more people trying to do this? It is, I think, intuitively to most people, one of the most important things that we can do in our day and age is ensure that the United States is properly modernized with AI technology, and yet it's a sparse field.
Well, I think that perhaps there was disproportionate attention to those who said they didn't want to engage. I'm from tech, I'm from Silicon Valley, and I'm not engaging, even though that was perhaps a minority set of voices that got disproportionate attention. And therefore, your decision to scale AI's work, we're trailblazers in this regard. Others are doing the same, kind of sister companies in the tech space. And I just know in my own work, if you look at it over the past decade, the number of tech companies, and there's all sorts of ways you could define them, but just broadly speaking, tech companies that now are in the defense arena is huge, and it's a monumental difference from where we were a decade ago. So perhaps I think we're getting there. It took longer than it should, but I think your efforts and others have allowed kind of this shift to take place. Let's go to the lightning round. We're with Alex Wang, the CEO and founder of Scale AI. Here's where we ask all our guests to provide their favorite Reagan book, favorite Reagan quote, or favorite Reagan speech. You can give us all three, two, or just one. What do you have to share?
Yeah, there's a quote from one of his speeches that I particularly like. I think this was from his 1967 inaugural as the new governor of California. So
reaching back, I like this. Good. All right, what do you got?
Yeah, pulling it back. The quote is, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation. And ties nicely to this whole conversation that we were having, because I think it's important that this generation of technologists and AI scientists understand that it is our duty to fight for freedom as well as our.
Well said. Great quote. One that he would repeat many times and into his presidency. And ultimately, we were talking about the China competition, Alex, and our systems. And I think in the end, because our system allows for freedom, provides for freedom, and we're built around it, that is our comparative advantage. And I think it plays out in this arena of artificial intelligence. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Reaganism. New episodes premiere weekly every Monday on YouTube and all podcast streaming platforms. If you like this episode, be sure to let us know and share with a friend.